Hey climbers, welcome back to Climb by VSC, a weekly show about building and scaling startups in the world of climate innovation. My name is Vijay Kapoor, general partner of VSC Ventures and co-host of Climb. Every week, I or a member of our VSC team will speak with a pioneer in the climate tech world about emerging technologies and novel ideas that will turn the tide on climate change. We've all heard enough of the doom and gloom. It's time for stories of purpose-driven innovation that lead to sustainable, positive change. In today's episode, my colleague Maggie Philbin is back and brings you all a great interview with Dylan Welch, CEO and Director of Communications for Green.org, a media platform specializing in renewable energy, sustainability, and clean tech news. They'll talk about how covering climate topics in today's evolving media has changed, and what it means to build communities that spur people to action against climate change. As always, I'm so happy that you've decided to join us. Now let's climb.
Welcome back to another episode of Climb by VSC. I'm your host, Maggie Philbin, and today we will be speaking with Dylan Welch, the CEO of Green.org. We'll be learning a lot about how he used his media and business experience to create new opportunities in the renewable energy, sustainability, and clean tech space. He has a great wealth of knowledge based on his background working in TV before this. And Dylan, I'm just so glad to have you here with us today.
Yeah, Maggie, thanks so much for having me. I just love people who are using media and PR and marketing and, social media to educate people about sustainability and the climate and finance and all that good stuff. So I'm excited to chat with you today.
Awesome. Well, why don't we actually kickstart it, especially for folks who may not be familiar with Green.org and your background. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about how you got here?
Yeah, for sure. It's a long journey, but to sum it all up, I worked as a television producer for a few years, was producing a business, finance, real estate, entrepreneurship television show here in San Diego that was syndicated around the country. But I just got burnt out working in that industry, and I was making my boss a ton of money, and I was getting a salary. And I was like, you know what? I want to kind of venture into this entrepreneur space, be my own boss, run my own business. And so I left that company, started a media and marketing company, was running that with clients, providing a bunch of different marketing services. While I was doing that and basically building all their brands and their social media channels and making them all this business, my team and I launched Green.org, which was basically a media channel all about sustainability, sharing news and renewable energy, clean technology, and just highlighting cool people doing exciting things. Started out as just a news site, expanded it to a social media channel, expanded it to a podcast, and then now we're also adding semi-annual events as well.
Damn, that's a lot of work. So in your time building it as a media brand, like how have you seen that it's changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how quickly the whole media industry as a whole is constantly changing. That's why I got into the industry at first, was because it's obviously a huge industry, but also the ability to use, screens and cameras and phones to influence people was something I've always been interested in. It started out with television and film just because that was what was like popular at the time. Then over the past 10 or so years, everything's changed so much with social media. Everyone's, their own content channel, their own content creator. So I've just been kind of watching it and trying to determine, what's the best move? How can we stay ahead of trends? What trends are just sort of like a flash in the pan, what'll die? And how can we keep growing our media company to, make revenue and pay the staff, but also sort of not sell out to, whatever's like the hot thing at the moment.
Have there been any climate startups that have been talking to you? Because I know you have a really sick podcast too. And so I'm sure founders or other interesting folks are always flying across your desk as people that you'd want to speak and meet with. So is there anyone that comes to mind that you're really
Yeah, I mean, there's so many cool companies out there. That's what is really exciting about Green.org, because on a day-to-day basis, we write like news articles and profile and highlight people and companies that are doing cool things. So it's really cool to see just sort of the different phases of companies that are out there. There's companies that are about to go public that have amazing electric vehicle technology. Then there's guys or women who are just like one-off teams who are starting to raise funds for this like crazy idea. Then there's, full-on companies that are already driving revenue. So really like the sustainable world as a whole is such a broad topic. Like any company can be sustainable to a certain extent. So whatever you're interested in, whether that's fashion, technology, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, energy, there's something out there for everyone. So whatever your interest is in, you can go and find those companies to work with and to partner up with.
On the fashion front, I read this morning that Ralph Lauren has a new program, and they're going to be launching this thing where you can return your old cashmere sweaters, give it back to them. They're going to reuse it, recycle it. And it's part of their whole like circular economy of clothing. I'm curious what you think about companies who launch initiatives like that. Is it greenwashing to you, or is it everyone has to do their part? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think in general, it's helpful, even if a company is not the most sustainable in the world, if they're at least acknowledging it and trying to make those steps towards being more sustainable, like no company right off the bat is going to be 100% sustainable. Literally, that's not possible. So I think the first step is to be like, okay, cool. Good for you for making that journey. Now let's like check in 6 months or in a year or whatever it is and see if they're actually sticking to it. There's definitely a huge, kind of greenwashing going on where every company is working on that, but also at the same time, it's better that they're making at least some sort of initiative than being like, nah, screw it. We'll just be extremely wasteful and like not worry about this. So there's like both sides, but I applaud any company that's at least trying to make, that happen in one way or another for their company.
Yeah, that's true. I've worked with a company in the sustainable packaging space, and he was always explaining to me how there are so many companies that had all these pledges, but zero plans. Is there a particular area of climate technology that you all and you and your team are really focused on reporting on right now that, when you're in the newsroom, you're deciding on your stories, like, oh, we must take on something like this?
Yeah, there's definitely the trends. And as a media company, like, we're not really out there trying to type up like 10 craziest electric vehicles of the future and sort of those clickbaity titles, but there's definitely sort of long-term trends that are happening. 5-6 years ago, like when Elon Musk was in Tesla was really exploding, everyone was talking about electric vehicles. That was kind of the forefront. So we wrote a lot about like electric vehicles. Then we've shifted over time. We did a lot about fashion just because the fashion industry is extremely wasteful, but there's also some really good companies that are sort of like trying to be more sustainable. Shout out to Adore Me, a huge sponsor of the Green Summit. And then now we're focusing a lot on kind of what you guys are doing, like more of the investment and financial side of green technology, just because, every business, every entrepreneur needs to, one, like raise money for not everyone needs to raise money, but like, it's good just to know the knowledge of how to raise money. It's good just to know how to invest in other clean technology companies. So we've been doing a lot of talking to a lot of different financial experts in the green tech space and just kind of getting their thoughts, feedback, and how we can apply their knowledge to the average person's everyday life.
Have there been any interesting things that come to mind that you'd want to share with our listeners?
I mean, it's just crazy, like the amount of money that's out there. Green.org is a relatively small company. So when we're all of a sudden talking to a venture capitalist firm that has $100 million in the bank that they're looking to invest in, clean tech or renewable energy, it's kind of like, all right, this is pretty cool. This is exciting. Like there's some people with deep pockets who want to invest in things that, can potentially change our future for the better. So that's what I like to see is like those big, crazy numbers that are almost like unfathomable. And then, they're using that money to invest in different companies. So that's what always gets me pretty excited. And that's why I like talking to venture capitalists and people in the financial, tech industry, because they've got some money to invest and there's companies out there that really need it. So it's cool when they can kind of come together.
Are you making personal investments of your own?
Not quite yet, but that is actually sort of the next step for what we want to do at green.org and myself.
Good for you.
Yeah,
I love that. Good for you. Did you imagine that this is how your life would transpire? Like, did you grow up one day? Like, how did you think about your future as a kid?
So this is such a crazy story. And like, I mean, when you're a business owner and an entrepreneur, or really anyone these days, like everyone has day-to-day anxieties of life, of paying your bills, of your job, of relationships. So sometimes you have to like take a step back and look at everything big picture. I remember when I was working as a television producer, I would carpool with my neighbor because we both worked very close to each other, and we'd always like bounce business ideas off each other or talk about like our goals or what's happening. And like I remember being like so burnt out. I was working every single day, like 6 a.m. to 9 p.m.
It's
7
a
days a
grueling
week.
job.
Yeah, and I was just like, man, I'm so burnt out. Like all I want to do, I remember saying this, like looking out the window, like all I want to do is run my own media company about sustainability. And then like
Wow.
fast forward, it kind of happened, which is pretty cool. So like I try to remember that and think about it now whenever there's, stressful things happening or, whatever like day-to-day stuff is going on. So it's kind of about like, again, keeping that big picture of seeing yourself and where you want to go in the next 5 years, 10 years, and then just kind of mapping out that game plan to make it happen. And that's what I'm doing every single day. It's like, okay, where do I want to be in the next 5 years? And how can I use what I'm doing now to then make that happen? So it's cool to like look back and see it come
Have there
together.
been any lessons learned like when you were making that leap?
Yeah, the biggest lesson learned is go out and do it. Honestly, like if you like, don't be afraid. There's obviously like so many, negative things that can come. And this is just specifically talking about leaving like a full-time corporate 9 to 5 job to start your own business. Not everyone has the passion or the want to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. But if that is like deep down inside you and you feel it, go out and make it happen. It's challenging, it's hard, but both the financial side of it can be extremely rewarding. You can take control of your life. You can set your own hours. And now's the best time to do it. And basically history, it's the easiest way to start your own business. You can start a business, with the start of an Instagram page and a couple posts on LinkedIn and Facebook if you have a product or a service. And then you just continue to grow it from there. It's not easy, but if that's what you want to do, like just create a plan day by day and go out and just make a little bit happen every single day.
Yeah. And Green.org has transpired a lot because you've launched the podcast and now you have the summits that you're putting on. And I know COVID was a little tough because all your summits were virtual, but now they're coming back in real life. Can you share a little bit about how that's going?
Yeah, I mean, Green.org, it's been a crazy journey. Like we've had 1,000, ideas that never worked out and 10,000 ideas that like kind of worked out. But in general, we have this game plan to keep growing it. And as like the revenue grows and the team grows, we can kind of reinvest into more things we want to do. So it really just started out as basically a news site blog, essentially. Like I don't like to call it like a blog because I feel like that like devalues it a little bit. But it just started out as a website where I would write articles and I would interview people. And then we slowly grew it. We added social media channels. We added our podcast. And then just kind of talking to like a business mentor of mine, he was like, dude, we put together a virtual summit and it was amazing for our business. Like you should do that too. So that kind of like clicked. We made that happen. And then we've had a few years of like virtual events during COVID. Then we just had our first in-person Green Summit in San Diego back in September. And it was so fun, just so inspirational. And so now we're excited to expand that into our London event, our New York City event, and our next San Diego event in 2023.
Are there any speakers that are going to be at those events that you're really looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, what's so fun, like this is one thing I love about putting the events together is basically each event has about 15 speakers. They all have about 10 to 15 minutes to go up on stage and give kind of like a TED Talk style presentation. So I love sort of putting together like this all-star lineup of speakers, and I like to mix it up with men, women, different generations, Gen Zs, millennials, boomers, different industries, and kind of putting together just this like crazy lineup, almost like a music festival. Like you kind of have to feel out like the crowd, and you're like, all right, I know this person might be a little bit of like not like boring, but like,
yeah, you need like the opener. You like someone to really hype the crowd up.
Yeah, exactly. We got to hype it up with like a really high energy speaker after this,
sure.
Which was really fun. And so, yeah, basically, now with 3 events in 3 new cities, we have 45 speaking spot, or yeah, 45 speaking spots.
Wow.
So we're just actually starting to announce our different speakers for the different events basically today. But we do have Hap Klopp, who's the founder of North Face, confirmed as our keynote speaker for all of the events. And he's close, like colleague, friend of mine. He's spoken at the last Green Summit. He's been on the podcast. So awesome to have sort of like that person who literally, he's in his probably 70s by now. So someone who like really was on the forefront of starting sustainable businesses, building like a really, high profile brand, a multi-billion-dollar business, and then to kind of like retire after, 25, 30 years. And then now he's just like this awesome dude who's speaking and hanging out and giving advice. Really excited to have him at the events and share his knowledge.
Yeah, I thought I had listened to the episode that when you had him on, and I love the part where he was explaining how when they were getting off the ground, they literally went door to door up the West Coast and sold 12 sleeping tents when they were first launching North Face.
I mean, it's so crazy, like thinking back, now you see North Face every single day. Anywhere you go, you see a North Face jacket or a hat or gloves or a tent, whatever it is. But thinking back on, in the 60s when they first started their company, they were just selling, door to door. So I think, from a business standpoint, getting that first sale, that first client is always kind of the hardest, and it gives you that little confidence. So then it's just like, cool, got that. Now think long term. 30 years from now, you never know what could be the next North Face. Yeah,
and an interesting part about their strategy too was having the physical magazine or the catalog where they would sell out of, which I feel like in some ways has made a bit of a comeback too. I'm sure maybe it's not as sustainable unless the paper that brands are sending us. But I mean, we do see a lot of brands now delivering catalogs to your home, whether furniture or clothing. And it's kind of nice, I feel, to break up because everything really is so online. And it's nice to just get a little reprieve of a gift in the mail.
I know. I mean, that's what's crazy is, again, kind of going back to like watching those trends of marketing and media change and shift and going with it. Like, you think back even 10 or so years ago, everyone got newspapers delivered every single day to their front door, which is like crazy to think about. You'd subscribe to a magazine and it would come like once a month. Now it's just like instant, constant, second by second news every single day. And I do think people tend to like, those physical things that you can hold and touch. And I think it's almost like people are sick of being bombarded constantly nonstop with like promotion, advertisement every single second. So when you can sort of like put down your screen and almost like go back to that old school, kind of got that, what's it called? Like the sort of brings back like old memories, I think.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Instagram is just so flooded with brands at this point, and you hardly see friends as much as you would hope to have.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah. It kind of sucks because I hate being on social media, and I just think it's really bad in general for like your mental health for like the average person. But then as the owner of a media company, it's like, well, unfortunately, that's kind of where our audience is, and we have to be there. So it's a very double-edged sword. What I do is I just hire people to manage it all for me, and I try to only get on there if I like absolutely have to. But I do find myself obviously, scrolling through different things, and yeah, I think like especially Instagram too, they've really kind of like gone downhill. Now like you look on your feed and it's like 2 posts of like your friend or someone you follow, and then an advertisement, and like you just kind of be like, damn, what am I doing with my life if all I'm just seeing is like in advertisements never ending? But that's just, how it is these days.
Yeah, it's so true. I want to go back a little bit to the conversation that you had with the CEO of North Face, or the founder. I thought it was really interesting in the podcast that you had with him because he was talking about you giving space to your employees to find something in the company that they're really proud of. And there was a situation where he had some people that were like on the manufacturing line, and they were also really interested in photography. So he's like, okay, great. Go to these far-flung places. I'm curious how you do that with your team too, and encourage them to find places within, green.org where they're really proud of. And maybe it's like a stretch goal for them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think this just kind of came through my own personal experience of, applying for jobs and getting a role and then being pigeonholed into that role, even though there might be another role that I'd be more passionate about or better at, but I was just never asked or never given the opportunity. So I constantly, and I'm always checking up with my team, and I'm like, okay, I know you're doing this, but what do you want to do? Like, what are you passionate about? Um, and I found that like a lot of people are like, oh, I really like what I'm doing now, but I'm really interested in like this side of things. For example, our social media manager, she manages all our social media channels. And just last week, I just had a call where I was just kind of checking in with her, and I was like, so like, what do you want to do? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And she was like, well, I really want to get more on like the sales and business development and partnership side of things. And I was like, well, that's like a huge part of green.org and the Green Summit too. Why don't you start like sitting in on some phone calls that we're having? And then, after a month of doing that, we can kind of see how you can get started, helping there. So I think in today's age with just like post COVID, everyone's kind of working from home. People are much more selective about how they're spending their professional time. And if they're not getting paid really well or they're not doing something they're passionate about, I think, there's a good opportunity that people aren't going to want to continue with that job. So it's really up to, the business owners, the bosses to find ways to keep your team excited. Otherwise, they're going to get burnt out and bored and leave and start their own competing company, which is what I did because my boss has never provided that for me.
That's really touching to hear and good inspiration, even as the team that I manage.
Yeah. I mean, like, you see all this stuff about like quiet quitting and all that. And like, I mean, life is so short that you should, only be spending time on things that you're passionate about, that you care about. Like, obviously, not every single person can quit their job and go out and start a business, but at the same time, like, if you're miserable in your job, life is way too short to just, stick around and do that. Like, life is all about new experiences, challenging yourself, growth. So you can't find that if you just are stuck in that position. So go out and like ask for opportunities, make opportunities happen. You're going to get rejected a million times. Get used to rejection as well. It's kind of fun now. I get rejected every single day. I'm like, hey, want to buy this product? And they're like, nope, go screw yourself. I'm like, sounds good. On to the next one. But yeah, so it's just like, growth and push yourself. And as a boss, you have the opportunity to, give your employees those opportunities as well. So it's all about like finding that middle ground.
So why don't we talk a little bit about just like the state of media? Because we see it's just Vox had layoffs this week. We saw the CNN layoffs that happened earlier in the year. And I'm just curious how you're thinking now about the future of media. And then at the same time, you do see job postings and new people joining companies or, media brands who are working and covering for climate. So I just want to hear your take a little bit about where you see the future of media.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, I like to look back on where it started and the trends that have happened versus just sort of looking at it like right now. Like, there will always be big companies laying off people, and there will always be big companies hiring. So I think in general, like, the biggest trend we've seen, say, in the past 10, 15 years is one, like what we were talking about before, downfall of like newspapers and cable television, which, used to dominate everything. Everyone used to go and watch their TV at a certain time for their favorite TV show. Then that kind of got replaced with like big social media channels, and everyone went online. CNN, Fox went online. Then obviously like Facebook, Instagram started and blew up. So I don't think like the digital news, digital media is going anywhere. But I do think there will be really huge corporate platforms like Facebook, like TikTok, like Instagram. But then we'll see we already are and have seen the emergence of just like millions of little mini niche content creators who are essentially their own little mini media news channel. And there's no better time than right now to kind of get on that and do that. Just because what we were talking about before with like starting your own business and entrepreneurship, like it is extremely hard to go out and start a media company that's successful, but at the same time, it's extremely easy. You can go out and start your own Instagram page or YouTube page with your phone right now. But being strategic about like how you actually grow that and monetize it is sort of that hard part. So I think that's what we'll continue to see. And again, going back to like people who, coming out of post-COVID don't want to settle for a job that they don't like. Why settle for a job making, say, $5,000 a month or, $60,000 a year when you could be a content creator, influencer, and make 10x that? Like a lot of people really like shit on like influencers, but at the same time, when an influencer who's 20 years old is making 50, 60, 100 grand a month, then it's kind of hard to shit on them. And the only people who are shitting on them are the people that are, like essentially jealous. So I really like watching it. I love seeing like young people just sort of do new, exciting things, work around the system. So hopefully that'll continue. And if you plan on starting a media channel, my advice is just don't start a media channel just to start a media channel. Like have some sort of product or service that you're selling, and you kind of like become the like thought leader in your space, and then sort of pitch your product or service versus just creating media channel to get, sponsorships or, like Patreon and things like that. Cause that's a lot harder to do right off the bat. And a lot of people I've seen try and fail. So that's my advice. Go out and start your own business, but be strategic and have a plan when you come to do it.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. And there's so many, there's beauty influencers, there's fashion influencers, there's people who did the YouTube unboxings of all the hardware products and gadgets. But who would you say, is there even an influencer in the climate space?
Yeah, Dylan Welch. No, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of like mini ones.
We got to get you spending more time on TikTok if you're
I know, seriously. That's like my biggest thing. Every day I'm like, should I be like more in front of the camera on TikTok? And then the other part, no, don't. You're too old. But I'm kind of like starting not to care and just like posting a little bit more often. But I think, there's a few people that come to mind, but I think, again, sustainability is just such a broad topic. Like the difference between a fashion sustainable blogger versus someone who's like looking at the latest electric vehicle trends, it's both, sustainable. So even like going back into like getting that niche area that you're interested in is helpful. So that's what's been nice about green.org is we've been relatively broad, but still in like the sustainable space. So we can kind of be flexible with it. But then there's other, zero waste bloggers who are huge on social media. So it's kind of like being strategic, again, starting it off and knowing like what lane you want to stick in is really important. Yeah.
Well, I've really loved our conversation today. I think we've spanned so much between everything from North Face to understanding what's happening in media to spending our time on TikTok or not spending it. Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave with us and our listeners?
Yes. Now all the same questions, but for you, I want to hear all of your thoughts and feedback. Where do you see the media industry going in 5-10 years?
I think it comes down to citizen journalism, to be honest. I think it's really going to be people like you or me who are delivering the content. And I think we're going to continue to see brands owning it themselves. You saw that with like Andreessen Horowitz. They're like, we're just going to launch our own media division and report our own news. Some of our startups, some of them that we don't back. And so I think you'll see that a lot from brands doing it on their own and not always depending upon mainstream media to cover it. So that's kind of like the citizen journalism or like the brand doing it themselves. But I think it's going to be that type of owned content like we're having today.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
No other thoughts on my end. Just hope that, everyone has a good day, safe week. If you're interested in hearing about, sustainable leaders and business owners and people who have, kind of walked the walk and talked the talk, would love it if you came to the Green Summit. We're basically using green.org to pull together like an all-star cast and list of speakers, business owners, influencers, leaders, and giving them a platform to share sort of their vision of what a sustainable future looks like. So hopefully we'll see you there. The events are so fun, so inspiring. San Diego, London, New York City, 2023. Hopefully we'll see you guys there.
Perfect. We'll catch you on green.org.
Great.
Thanks, Dylan.
Of course.
Well, that's all for this week's episode of Climb by VSC. Thank you so much for watching and listening. A few quick shout-outs before you go. Our thanks to Dylan for joining us to share his journey on Climb. Special thanks to Credo for their help in producing and promoting this episode. To visit any part of today's conversation again, you can find the full transcript on vscventures.com. Our thanks to Josue Ramiro for posting these every week. Lastly, if you've listened this far, please leave us a rating on Spotify or review on iTunes. It only takes a few seconds, really helps us out, and as far as I know, still carbon neutral. Well, that's all for now. We'll see you all next week on Climb by VSC.